podcast of the Star Wars Connection. I am your host, Reya, and today we will be discussing a topic that has provoked endless debate and speculation among Star Wars fans. He is tall, he is pale, mysterious, and more than a little dangerous. He is Supreme Leader Snoke. We will discuss what we know so far about Snoke, theories regarding his identity, his possible agenda, relationship with some of the other characters in the trilogy, and much, much more. We will also be discussing some things that have never been discussed in other videos, podcasts, such as the famous Rudyard Kipling poem and Snoke's theme. So please stay tuned. We will be discussing it at some point in this podcast. So today in this discussion, I am joined by two Star Wars Connection members. First panelist is Star Wars Connection member and veteran podcaster Michelle.
Hi.
Our second panelist is Star Wars Connection member and also a veteran podcaster, Lee.
Hello.
So now we shall get to the discussion. Who is Supreme Leader Snoke? What do we know about this mysterious figure?
Well, the word Snoke means Snoop in Norwegian, and we know just from past experience that names almost always have some sort of significance in Star Wars.
Right. We also know, at least on prima facie, we know that he is supposed to be the supreme leader of the entire First Order. He's this calculating, reserved military leader, but he's also a powerful force user and master of the dark side. At least that's what we know as of now.
He also seems to be very powerful in the Force, and we know that he has some connection with the Knights of Ren. Kylo Ren reports to him, and Kylo Ren is the master of the Knights of Ren, so there's a connection there. And we know that Kylo Ren is his apprentice, and he has had other apprentices in the past.
Yes, but Kylo, I think, is supposed to be the most promising of them all, according to the novelization at least.
Do you guys remember what it was that was mentioned there? And because I didn't actually make it through the novelization, so how do we know that he is the most promising? Did Snoke mention that?
Yes, he actually said he said, I believe the exact words, but he was the most promising of his apprentices. And then Snoke went on to say how you cannot create a fine work of art from inferior materials, and he considered Kylo with this perfect blend of light and dark to be his masterpiece, or something to that effect.
Wow. I can see why they didn't include that in the movie, because it's a little wordy, but it's still, it's very telling. So that's why you kind of have to read the novelizations too.
Most definitely. And of course, he has very deep pockets. He's got a Starkiller base. He's got all sorts of resources in terms of got lots of stormtroopers and pilots. They've got the best of equipment. So he obviously has a lot of money. Or he's got great sponsors. Definitely got lots of money. And there's one more thing. In the Star Wars database, there's a little fact which we're not really mentioned. It's not mentioned anywhere else. He is not based in one location. It seems that he connects with people from some sort of a mobile command post.
Yeah, and we see that he's basically a hologram the whole time that he's on screen during the film. So it'd be interesting to know where he is.
Definitely. And oh yes. Sorry.
I was going to say that we also know from some of the supplemental materials that he is very old and he's aware of events of the past. There was a line, I believe, in the novelization how he saw the Empire rise and fall. So we know that he predates that, at least.
Definitely, and he's also not just age but damage. His one cheek looks like it's blown in, like something like there was a bomb in his face or something. It looks pretty ugly. Speaking of the topic of severely damaged, why don't we go a little more into Snoke's unique look? He is quite different from all the other baddies we have seen so far in Star Wars. To some extent, at least.
Yeah.
I
was going to say, I thought it was interesting. I did read the script for the film, for The Force Awakens, and they make it a point to note that he looks old, wounded, fragile, and powerful all at the same time. I thought that was an interesting paradox, that the fact that, you can tell that this guy is very powerful, but they went, out of their way to make him appear wounded, like he's got a scar and all that, so...
Definitely, definitely. And he also, I think that is when you're talking about power, the art of the Force Awakens book, actually, the room that the conference room, his space Skype room, where his hologram appears, is supposed to be, was wanted to hide the fact that it was a hologram, and I think it's supposed to be giving the same look as the Lincoln Memorial. So I think it is about something imposing and powerful that they want to depict here. In fact, Snoke is one of the last people who was conceptualized. I mean, his look was one of the last things that was decided for the Force Awakens.
Yeah, and another interesting thing is before they came up with the final design for Snoke, there was at one point, well, now we know that he's ancient and he's creepy looking, but according to J.J. Abrams and Neil Scanlon, who was Star Wars The Force Awakens chief of creature and droid effects, there was at one point where Snoke was actually quite a bit younger and an attractive female. And in the Art of the Force Awakens book, there is even an image of a sort of devious-looking female who, I don't know if that was Snoke or not, but who was seducing a Jedi. So it's interesting to think of how the dynamic of that Snoke-Kylo Ren relationship might have been different if Snoke were female.
Yeah, I think that would have taken the story in a completely different direction. If it had been an attractive woman and Kylo Ren, and especially even the Rey and Snoke dynamic, or the Rey, Kylo, and Snoke dynamic that we think we're gonna see more of in the episodes coming forward. I mean, it would have been like could have been like a weird triangle or like weird sexual rival stuff going on. So I'm glad they didn't go in that direction.
I'm glad to know. Otherwise, you'd have more shipping wars than we already do. There would have been.
Weirdly, I think that Hux would have been the same towards Snoke, even if he had been like an attractive woman. Like Hux is just like totally like following Snoke blindly. But we'll get more into that later on, into the relationships and dynamics.
And also there's one more thing. I mean, speaking of Snoke being a beautiful woman, even though he was a beautiful, I mean, he's not a beautiful woman, but there is supposed to be he's supposed to be beautiful in some creepy way, I think, if I remember right. Somebody did talk about him being beautiful to look at.
Yeah, in fact, the senior sculptor Ivan Manzella had said that JJ wanted to base Snoke on the Hammer films' horror movies, giving the design a ghoulish look. We made a bust out of marble powder because we talked about him being very pale, and I imagined him to be a beautiful marble sculpture, so dark and menacing, but actually quite beautiful to look at.
So our space baddie is beautiful, but in a scarred, zombified way. What else? What else do we know about him?
Well, we know that he's very old. He may be older than Maz Kanata, who is over 1,000 years old. And there's a quote from Andy Serkis in Entertainment Weekly where he's saying he's aware of what's gone on in the respect that he has been around and is aware of prior events. I think it'd be fair to say that he is aware of the past to a great degree. So that's an interesting quote. And of course he tells Kylo Ren that he watched the Galactic Empire rise and then fall. And so that confirms that he was at least old enough to have seen the Clone Wars. The fact that he looks decrepit and old in the face, I mean, that confirms that. But like, where has he been hanging out all this time? If he's just observing quietly.
I know we have some theories on that.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing we know about Snoke is that he is a male humanoid, but we aren't quite sure if he's actually human. According to the novelization from Alan Dean Foster, Snoke is tall and gaunt, and he was humanoid but not human. However, we also know that the novelization was actually never read by the Lucasfilm Story Group, and people have tweeted Pablo Hidalgo asking him if Snoke is human, and he's always very evasive around the subject. So we don't know if maybe he was human at one time and was just completely corrupted by the dark side of the Force like Palpatine, or if he's in fact a humanoid alien.
The script actually says not entirely human. That's the way they chose to describe him. So that I think they're being intentionally vague on all sides.
Right.
And I think the two facts we do know is that the hologram on Starkiller Base, he is around 25 feet tall in height. Mm-hmm. So that is one thing we know. And the other is a confirmation from Neil Scanlon that Snoke is 7 foot something. And he's very thin with large hands. Okay, now I don't know why that detail should be there, but but
You can draw some parallel between Snoke and Trump. I don't know.
not going there. Not going there.
Yeah, no,
But,
I mean, don't want to get there right now. We're
oh god. Yeah, he could be human. He could be humanoid. I mean, 7 foot something. There are humans in that height range as well.
I actually was hoping that he would be really tiny, like he would be like even tinier than Yoda. That would be hilarious because, why is he projecting himself so humongous, and towering over these really tall dudes that are Kylo Ren and Hux. So it would be funny if he were just pocket sized.
Yeah, I know he comes in front of Kylo and Kylo steps on his foot. Oops, sorry. Actually, I'll just throw in a little bit of information for those who might be interested. In Legends, there was a character called Croak, who was a tiny little character who used to project himself as a tall human figure. So, but of course, now that we have confirmed that he's 7 foot tall, I think that character is out of the question. Okay, and now coming back to our man. There's also the thing that he has this is what we know of his physical features, that he has an elongated face, he's got scarred skin, he's pale and has pale blue eyes. And he has 2 scars that are prominent. One is a large scar on the top of his head, all the way down to his brow, and then he has something that's either a scar or a burn on his right cheek, which contorts his face.
Right, and just to add on to that Ian Manzella quote from earlier, he'd also said, it's almost like Snoke was quite handsome when he was younger, and in my mind, the more powerful he's become, the more the dark side consumes him. We made his eyes really pale blue, so that the whites of his eyes are almost the same color as his skin and costume. And eventually they went with a slightly more youthful version of the design.
And I don't think we get any clues from his clothes either, because we just see him in some sort of a cloak or some kind of robe.
It looks almost like a dressing gown.
Well, what do you guys think about what the finished product was as far as Snoke's physical appearance? Did you think that he was scary enough? I feel like there's been a lot of criticism that he's not menacing enough. He's not, really that weird or interesting to look at necessarily. Although reading about all the care they put into making sure that he looked, both fragile and powerful, sounds pretty cool. But I just remember seeing him pop up and thinking, okay, he's not really that impressive, and he's actually a little reminiscing of Gollum and Voldemort in some way.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say that, I think part of I think the criticism is somewhat valid. I think part of the criticism, has to do with the name Snoke, which everybody kind of giggles at.
Yeah.
You might find out that the name has significance, and people won't giggle about it anymore, but it seems like from what we know so far, which is very little, they could have maybe gone with a little bit more intimidating of a name. And then we just don't know anything about his endgame or what he wants. So we don't know beyond the fact that, he's kind of creepy looking and he's got this creepy relationship with Kylo Ren. We don't know, and obviously he runs the First Order.
Yeah.
We don't know why we should dread him yet.
Do you know, the other thing is, I've heard a lot of people say that the CGI was kind of janky looking with Snoke. It wasn't really that good. But remember, he's a hologram. We haven't really seen him in person. And holograms never look that good in Star Wars anyway. So I think maybe we can give him the benefit of the doubt. But he is creepy more for when you think about, what his relationships are and how he's kind of like a master puppeteer. But as far as his appearance, I think maybe they could have done a little bit more. But yeah.
One thing I'll just throw in before we go ahead is that the Snoke may look a little, underwhelming, but his the way he speaks is a little scary. I mean, he has this forceful undertone, and he speaks very slowly. So he is obviously a very deliberate and dangerous character. I mean, that part comes out in the voice. The look, I'm not impressed yet, but the voice, there is something.
Yeah.
I agree.
Otherwise, he looks like Space Gollum in a dressing gown. I mean, yes.
Which is creepy, though.
Speaking of his personality and relationships, we've seen him have some interactions with Hux, with Kylo. We've heard him talk about Luke. And of course, now there's even the question of Rey herself. So we should look into these relationships, what we feel could be his possible, equations with all these people.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, one of the things that J.J. Abrams said about the First Order was, and I'm going to read a quote from him, that all came out of a conversation about what would have happened if the Nazis all went to Argentina, but then started working together again. What could be born of that? Could the First Order exist as a group that actually admired the Empire? Could the work of the Empire be seen as unfulfilled? And could Vader be a martyr? Could there be a need to see through what didn't get done? So Snoke seems to have taken on the mission of the Empire. He rallied the fleeing demoralized Imperial remnants and painted Vader as a martyr. And, what better status symbol than to possess Vader's own grandson?
Right, and with the emphasis on relic hunting and the Imperial and Vader relics that have been in the new canon books, such as Bloodline and Life Debt, you almost wonder if Ben Solo is seen as a trophy or sort of a living Vader relic.
Exactly.
In fact, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
No, it kind of brings back that whole line about how in the novel, about how he is made of dark and light, the fight, and how even a sculptor cannot fashion a masterpiece from poor materials. How Ben is somebody who's strong, pure, unbreakable. So it's kind of creepy lines, but he is definitely sees Ben as somebody very special.
Yeah, and definitely a trophy for him if you think about, taking Leia's own son from right under her nose and Luke Skywalker's apprentice. I mean, this is like a big political coup for Snoke as well.
Yeah. Did anyone of you notice that in Force Awakens, this is there in the novel, but I think even in the movie you can see a slight wariness, when Leia mentions the name Snoke, Han has a funny expression, while in the novel he actually draws back, so he's kind of uncomfortable with that name.
Yeah, it seems like both Han and Leia know Snoke from somewhere, and it comes across that they believe that he's manipulative and that he exploits Force-sensitive individuals such as Ben for their power.
That's true, definitely. And it's obviously he's been up to this from a very early. Ben was very young when all this started. The novel at least seems to point at that.
Which is super creepy when you think about it, huh?
Yeah.
So we have the quote that from the novelization where Leia tells Han, from the shadows in the beginning, even before I realized what was happening, he was manipulating everything, pulling our son toward the dark side. And in the TFA documentary, J.J. Abrams specifically mentions that someone was watching their boy. Their boy had a target on his back. And I know some people have compared that to like grooming with, abusers. So there's like a very kind of twisted kind of undertone to the relationship between Snoke and Kylo Ren, or Ben Solo, as it were.
Right, we know that Snoke turned Kylo Ren or Ben Solo against Luke and his new Jedi Order. And from that scene on the bridge, Kylo claims that he thinks Snoke is wise, but it almost comes across as if sounds like he was almost brainwashed into thinking that.
Yeah, and I think that the way that Snoke got his hooks into Kylo Ren was through the Vader lineage. Like Kylo Ren has aligned himself with Vader in a way. You can see that when he's talking to the mask. So, kind of a little tiny bit off topic, but one of the things that really struck me in Kylo Ren's first scene was when Lord San Tekka tells him, you cannot deny the truth that is your family, and he says, you are so right, and then he kind of just cuts him down. He's talking about Darth Vader, so I think that's the glue that's keeping Kylo Ren aligned to Snoke, is really that Vader connection. But one thing that you guys had mentioned earlier, when Han tells Kylo Ren, he's using you for your power, it raises the question, does that mean that Snoke is feeding off Kylo Ren's Force energy to sustain himself, or is he going to be regenerating himself, kind of like Voldemort did over the course of the Harry Potter series, or is he just barely hanging on because of Kylo? What do you guys think about that?
I can just give you a quick thought on it, because I would discuss it more in my theory, but I kind of thought of Dracula when he, Bram Stoker's Dracula, when he's feeding off everybody, he looks younger and younger,
Mm-hmm.
and that person gets drained, but they're barely alive. And you have Kylo, who's supposed, when Han sees him, he thinks that, oh, his hair is grown, he's looking paler. He kind of
Yeah.
remind me a bit of Mina Harker walking around.
Interesting. Well, I think that's kind of what Han was getting at, when he told them he's just using you for your power, and kind of when he's done with you, you're going to be discarded. But then the other question is, when Snoke says that he's going to complete Kylo Ren's training, is that something he really intends to do? I mean, is he trying to turn Kylo into a super weapon? Which I think that seems like, on the surface, like, yeah, of course, But then does he really want Kylo Ren to reach his full potential? I mean, that would be dangerous to Snoke, I think. Kylo Ren would then overturn him, right? That's usually how it goes in these kinds of relationships. So to me, I think that it's in Snoke's best interest if Kylo Ren remains in the state of conflict that he's in right now, where he's just so, disorganized and uncertain, so that he can continue to manipulate him. And another question is, what is Kylo Ren getting out of the alliance with Snoke? Aside from maybe learning more about Vader, maybe that's what initially drew him, but what keeps him there? So, some of the discussions that we've had since the film came out is about kind of like the Freudian undertones in the relationship between Snoke and Kylo Ren. Is this his like new father figure? Kylo Ren is kind of subjecting himself to like this like harsh superego that would be Snoke, but he's also kind of rebelling against him. He's doing things that you wouldn't expect him to do if he were completely aligned with Snoke. Like, why did he let Finn go? And he chose to go after Rey instead of getting the map that was the thing that Snoke really wanted. And he lied to Snoke about how he felt about Han. So little things like that, like ostensibly he is doing everything Snoke wants him to do, but those little things are kind of going against what Snoke wants. So in a sense, Kylo is really doing his own thing. That kind of points to his alliance to Snoke being a little bit tenuous. So it seems like, I think a lot of fans who watched the movie felt like Kylo was like 100% bad and kind of a Snoke's puppet. But if you look at it carefully, it seems like Kylo Ren's more aligned with the charred mask of Vader. It's like we. And then with the Supreme Leader, he's kind of putting up this front, to hide his weakness. He might know that he's being used. And, well, Han tells him, you know it. And so he does know it. Does Snoke know this? So it's very interesting dynamics between Snoke and Kylo Ren, I think.
And if you contrast those dynamics between Kylo Ren and Snoke with the dynamics between Hux and Snoke, you look at Hux, he's at Snoke's beck and call. And at the end of The Force Awakens, Snoke orders Hux to bring Ren to him. And Hux seems to look at Snoke as a parent figure as well. And that little bit of rivalry that a lot of people have latched onto, you can tell that Hux is kind of competing with Kylo for Snoke's approval.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like Hux is completely on board with whatever it is that Snoke wants to do. He's completely prepared to even go down with Snoke's ship if it's gonna sink. He's loyal and he's not gonna question anything. It really feels like he is competing against Kylo Ren for Snoke's favor, as you say, Michelle. But as far as Snoke, I think that Ren is clearly Snoke's favorite. There's no contest there. He's more important for whatever it is that Snoke intends to do. And again, going back to the script, there's a line there about when they're in that chamber and then Hux leaves, there's, quote, a new intimacy in Snoke's voice when he asks Kylo Ren, if he's felt the awakening. So a new intimacy once Hux is gone and they're alone.
Right. And we know from Life Debt, it's interesting when we talk about the Snoke being a father figure to Hux as well, because we know from Life Debt that a young Hux was rescued along with his father, Brendol Hux, by the remains of the Empire. And the reason given was the Empire needs children, which sounds super, super creepy.
Yeah.
And we don't know what happened to Hux's father beyond the fact that he supposedly disappeared around the time of the Battle of Jakku. And as of yet, we haven't heard anything more to find out what happened there.
I just want to throw in one thing. It's interesting that Hux knows that Kylo has another agenda, because he's the one who tells him that, careful, Ren, your personal interests should not interfere with that of the leader. So, yeah, and of course, when he's standing and making the big speech before the Star Killer weapon is charged, he looks quite crazy and happy. So, I don't know, Snoke, if they are looking, if this crazy disciple of Snoke, I mean, not spiritual disciple, but the crazy follower of Snoke, Hux, is aware that Kylo has another agenda. I'm surprised that Snoke himself is not aware of it, unless, of course, that tracker on Kylo's belt is some sort of a clue of his distrust. These are things I think we will probably have to revisit after episode 8 comes out. There's one equation we have not gone into because we have not seen it in the movie yet, and that is Snoke and Rey's potential relationship. I mean, are we looking at, is he going to look at Rey as a new potential apprentice? Is he kind of a little dismayed that Kylo is getting distracted by somebody? And is he going to try and kill her off? I mean, there are a lot of possibilities. I'll just briefly just mention this. I think that Snoke never knew about Rey once she was on Jakku because speaking of Jakku, I think that because with all those Force, Church of the Force and cults and anchorites hanging around there, either this planet is a very Force-strong planet, or it's a Force-negative planet, and Rey got hidden over there. I don't know what her future relationship with Snoke is going to be, but I think Snoke never knew that she was still around, or was ever around, because of Jakku.
Right. It seems like there's too many suspicious ties to Jakku. And my own personal theory is that whatever caused Rey to be abandoned on Jakku has something to do with Snoke and his endgame. And I think that once he figures out who she is, if he hasn't already, he'll either want to kill her to finish whatever his goal was with her parents, or he'll want to turn her to the dark side. And I do believe that in some way Snoke was responsible for the death of her parents.
I can see why you would feel that way, and I think that there is a Snoke connection. Like, Snoke keeps coming up somehow, right? But I'm more in the camp that Rey's parents' death is probably related to Luke more than Snoke or the First Order, and that when she finds that out, that's going to cause her to have this crisis of faith, right? And that she may, quote, flirt with the dark side. But in any case, I do think that Snoke plays a part in it somehow, and I think that he probably will find out or realize who she is, and then he'll reveal to her, whatever happened to her parents. But anyway, talking about like Snoke and Rey, what would Snoke want with Rey? I think that he would always be interested in kind of upgrading as far as his apprentice. So if he thinks that Rey is more powerful than Kylo Ren, he might be interested in replacing Ren with Rey. But more importantly, I think he'd want to prevent Rey's becoming a Jedi by any means necessary. And that could mean recruiting her for himself or just eliminating her entirely. Because it really seems like what he doesn't want is for the new Jedi Order to rise. And somehow Luke keeps coming in here. So I think there's a Luke-Snoke connection too that we just don't know enough about at this point.
In fact, one thing is there that Snoke is a rather calm gentleman. It's only when he hears about Luke or some sort of big failure that he starts losing his temper. I don't know if anybody else has noticed this.
Yeah,
he's usually very calm.
Yeah, he was like weirdly calm when the planet was collapsing, right? He was almost nonchalant, but then I found it kind of odd that when Hux was kind of, fumbling with his excuses about, how it was all his fault that the droid had escaped, like, Snoke actually stood up, he jumped to his feet and he yelled at him. Like, that seems kind of out of character, but you're right, there was a connection to Luke there, so maybe that's what got him so agitated. But speaking about his personality, I mean, Snoke's not that charismatic compared to other villains. I feel like he's not as compelling, or hasn't been up until now. Like, I'm thinking of, like, Palpatine, who's fascinating to watch, or even Dooku. Like, there's something more interesting in their demeanor than what we see in Snoke, and maybe that in itself is kind of intriguing. Like, what's up with him? I feel like there's so much that we don't know, and that he may become more compelling going forward.
I think that he will. I tend to be one of the people who subscribes to the belief that he's probably, a member of some ancient order of things, or some sort of ancient evil that's been unleashed. So I think that when we find out more about him, he'll be more compelling.
No, I completely agree. Because we have, in all the trilogy movies so far and the TV shows, we have the likes of Paul, who he's a big fan favorite. It's very hard to compete with someone that acrobatic and who looks like the devil and has evolved as a character over time. Then you have Palpatine, who goes from this modest politician to supreme tyrant of the galaxy. And then you have Dooku, who was supposed to be the greatest Jedi and then went on to become a very misguided Sith. So all of them have very interesting character
And
arcs.
of course, Vader. We can't leave him out.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot. And of course, Vader has the most interesting character arc.
The breathing alone, is enough to make him fascinating.
Yeah, and get many toasters in his in his likeness. But no, the thing is that Supreme Leader Snoke we don't know enough about, but there is one thing: he has to be much more scary than all these guys, because otherwise he's going to fall flat. So whatever it is, he has to be much more intimidating or have a much better story. Something is there.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are waiting, and I think that's part of what has harmed Kylo Ren's reputation, is that people are kind of just waiting for Kylo Ren to get up and dispatch Snoke early on in Episode 8 and become the big bad himself. Or that King Piranha is going to be the big bad. Like, maybe Snoke isn't really it. But I think you guys are right. There's more to him. There's enough in what we know that's creepy. And we'll see more that, will be scarier, creepier going forward.
Definitely. And speaking of creepy and villains of the galaxy, usually the baddies have all been Sith till now. So could Snoke be a Sith? Not a Sith. A Sith. And would Kylo be his Sith apprentice?
Yeah, I feel like people can't let go of the fact that there isn't a Sith in Episode 7, but that's what J.J. Abrams said, in his interview with Empire. He said, Kylo Ren is not a Sith. He works under Supreme Leader Snoke, who is a powerful figure on the dark side of the Force. So if Kylo Ren is not a Sith, it is unlikely that his master is a Sith, right?
Right, and Pablo Hidalgo has also confirmed multiple times on Twitter that there are no Sith in The Force Awakens. And so, although neither Snoke nor Kylo Ren are Sith, there is still a master-apprentice dynamic there that feels familiar, and I think that might be why people keep thinking of them as Sith.
Exactly. And then, there's lightsabers and there's that whole vibe, so people are kind of waiting for them to reveal themselves, and then if the Sith are gone, then, who are they? So there's a lot of questions. But yeah, I think for sure we can rule out that Snoke is a Sith. Unless, of course, he is a Sith like Plagueis or something, but we'll get more into that. But I don't think so. This concludes part 1 of our Snoke podcast. We'd like to give a special thank you to our viewers and contributors. If you'd like to leave us a question or a comment, you can contact us through our YouTube page, or you can email us at starwarsconnection09@gmail.com. Stay tuned for part 2 of our Snoke podcast coming soon. We'll be discussing theories about Snoke's origins that you won't hear anywhere else. Until next time, may the Force be with you.